My parents deserved one perfect night. 35 years of early mornings, double shifts, and second-hand winter coats, so my sister and I could have new ones. One dinner. That was all I wanted to give them. I had the private room reserved at one of the best restaurants in the city. The kind of place with linen napkins and a sommelier who actually knows what he's talking about. I had the photo slideshow ready on the projector. I had my mother's favorite flowers centered on every table. And then my sister-in-law walked through the door with her boyfriend and 4 of her friends. Pulled out the chair I had saved for my father. Dropped her designer bag on the seat, like she was claiming territory. And told the nearest waiter to bring a bottle of Chateau Pichon for the whole table, because her sister-in-law was celebrating tonight and money was clearly not an issue. I felt my jaw tighten. I felt my fingernails press into my palm under the edge of the tablecloth. My mother looked at me from across the room with that quiet, knowing expression she has worn my entire life. The one that says, "I see it. I know. Hold on." I smiled back at her. I squeezed my husband's hand once, excused myself to use the restroom, and walked calmly toward the front of the restaurant to find the manager. Because I had spent 11 years managing commercial real estate contracts in downtown Toronto, and I understand one thing better than most: the time to fix a problem is the moment you see it. Not after it has already cost you everything. I am a property manager for a mid-sized commercial firm. My job is to read people, read agreements, and make sure everyone is held to exactly what they signed. I am not dramatic. I do not yell. I do not make scenes. What I do is document, plan, and execute with the kind of calm that people sometimes mistake for passivity. Right up until they discover it was never passivity at all. My sister-in-law is my husband's younger sister by 3 years. She is 31, lives in a rented condo in Mississauga that she can barely afford, and has built an entire personality around the appearance of a life she does not actually have. The Instagram photos show restaurant patios and weekend getaways. The reality is 2 missed rent payments last spring, a car that was repossessed in February, and a rotating cast of friends and boyfriends she entertains by spending money she does not have on things she cannot keep. My husband loves his sister, the way only a big brother can, with the kind of loyalty that bends logic and rewrites history. He remembers the little girl who used to follow him around the backyard. He does not always see the grown woman who has borrowed money from us 4 separate times and returned it exactly 0 times. $1,400 for an emergency dental bill that turned out to be a trip to Vegas. $800 for groceries and gas that somehow became a spa weekend in Collingwood. $300. Twice. For reasons that shifted every time he asked. My husband is generous and good, and she has spent years learning exactly how to use that. I had been looking forward to this anniversary dinner for 4 months. My parents do not celebrate themselves. They never have. My father grew up in a small town outside of Halifax without much, and my mother spent her 20s putting everyone else first. And together they built a quiet, steady life in Scarborough, where love was shown in casseroles, left on the counter, and bills paid on time, and children who grew up feeling completely safe. They did not need a party. They did not ask for one. I planned it anyway because some debts cannot be repaid in any currency other than attention and time, and a room full of people who love you. I had invited 14 people. Close family. Their oldest friends. My father's brother who drove in from Barrie. 14 people. A set menu. A private room. And a dinner that I had prepaid the deposit on 2 months in advance. My sister-in-law was on the guest list. Her invitation said +1. Singular. With the clear understanding that this was an intimate gathering. She brought 6. Her boyfriend, who I have met twice and who seems genuinely pleasant in the way that people who have not yet been fully consumed by someone else tend to be, walked in looking slightly confused. Behind him came 4 women I had never seen before, and 1 man with a camera around his neck, who my sister-in-law introduced to the room at large as her photographer. Because apparently my parents' anniversary dinner was also a content opportunity. I counted the chairs. I counted the people. I looked at the table that seated 14, and understood immediately that my sister-in-law had not made a mistake. She had made a calculation. She had looked at this evening, seen an open tab, a nice room, and an audience, and decided that the cost of crashing would be absorbed by someone else. As it always had been. My mother-in-law caught my eye from across the room. She came toward me quickly, her heels clicking on the hardwood, and she steered me by the elbow toward the corridor near the coat check. She's a woman who has never said a hard thing directly, if she could find a softer way around it. She loves her children with the kind of love that has no edges, which is a beautiful quality, and also the reason her daughter is 31 years old and has never once faced a consequence. I know, she said before I could speak. Her voice was low and tight. I know this isn't what you planned, but she's already here. And her friends are already here. And it would absolutely ruin the night if we made this into something. Your in-laws are watching. Your parents are watching. She paused. She's been going through a hard time. I looked at her. She was not wrong that my parents were watching. She was not wrong that my in-laws were watching. She was also describing a woman who had just brought a photographer to my parents' anniversary dinner without asking anyone's permission. How long? I said, keeping my voice completely even. Are we going to keep calling it a hard time? My mother-in-law blinked. She has been going through a hard time. I continued. For every single event I have ever planned. She went through a hard time at our housewarming when she took the cash gifts off the table, and my husband spent 2 months telling himself he must have miscounted. She went through a hard time last Christmas when she asked my husband for $600 4 days before the 25th and cried on the phone for 40 minutes. Every occasion that involves a room, un table, and someone else's credit card somehow coincides with a hard time. My mother-in-law opened her mouth. I took one step closer. Tonight is not about her hard time. Tonight is about my mother and father, who drove 2 hours in January ice last year to help us move. Tonight is a fixed guest list, a prepaid menu, and a room I reserved in September. I am not going to ruin my parents' anniversary, but I am also not going to fund a dinner for 6 uninvited guests and a content photographer because your daughter decided this was her opportunity. I held her gaze. Either she sends 5 of those people home right now, or they stay and pay their own way. Those are the only 2 options on the table tonight. I turned and walked back toward the entrance before she could answer. The restaurant manager's name was Priya. I had spoken to her 3 times during the planning process, and she was exactly the kind of professional who understands instinctively when someone needs a logistical solution, not a sympathetic ear. I explained the situation in under 90 seconds. 6 walk-ins. Uninvited. At a private event. I needed a second table set up in the adjacent dining room. Separate check. Separate service. 0 connection to my account, or the fixed menu I had prepaid. Priya nodded once. Considered done. She said, I'll have one of the servers, let them know the private room is at capacity, and show them to a table. I went back to my parents. I sat down next to my mother, squeezed her hand, and told her she looked beautiful. Which she did. My father was already deep in conversation with his brother. The slideshow was queued up. The wine I had selected was being poured. For the next 2 hours, the room was exactly what I had intended it to be. I will not pretend I was not aware of what was happening. 1 room over. I could hear, occasionally, my sister-in-law's voice carrying over the low music. I heard laughter that was slightly too loud, and the particular kind of performance that happens when someone is trying to convince an audience, including themselves, that everything is fine. I sat with my parents, and I let the evening be theirs. At 9:45, the server brought the bill to the adjacent table. I had stepped out briefly to get some air, and I was near enough to the service corridor to see most of what happened next without being in the room. My sister-in-law reached into her bag with the easy confidence of someone who has never considered that a card might not work. She pulled out a Visa and handed it across the table without looking at the total. The server ran it quietly, came back, said something I could not hear. My sister-in-law's hand stilled. She took the card back, looked at it like it had done something to personally offend her, and reached into her wallet for a second one. A MasterCard this time, which she extended with slightly less ease. The server came back again. Her boyfriend had gone very still. The photographer was studying the menu with intense focus. One of the women pulled out her own phone and began scrolling. The particular silence of 6 people pretending not to be aware of something is unmistakable. My sister-in-law found a 3rd card from the very back of her wallet. The kind of place where things go when you already know they are probably not going to work. and she handed it to the server with her chin tilted up as though posture could compensate for the problem. The server came back a third time. Her boyfriend said something quiet. My sister-in-law said something sharper. One of the women picked up her coat. Within 4 minutes, 3 of the 6 people at that table had remembered previous commitments and gathered their things. The fast, slightly graceless exit of people who do not want to be associated with whatever is about to happen next. The photographer left without a word. The boyfriend remained, sitting with his hands flat on the table and the expression of someone rethinking a series of decisions. My sister-in-law came out of the adjacent room and walked directly toward me. "This is ridiculous," she said. Her voice was controlled, but I could see the effort it cost her. "There was clearly a mix-up with the reservation, and I need you to add my table to your account so we can sort this out tomorrow." I looked at her for a moment. I thought about the $1,400 that went to Vegas. I thought about the $600 before Christmas. I thought about my husband calling her every week to check in. Patient and constant. While she spent those calls asking for things. "There was no mix-up," I said. "You brought 6 people to a private dinner, without asking. Priya's team set up a separate table for you, and provided full service. The bill is for what you ordered. I didn't know there would be a separate bill." "You didn't ask," I said. "Uninvited guests aren't my responsibility." I turned around and went back to my parents. My father was telling the story about how he met my mother at a bus stop in the rain, in 1989, and she made him wait 4 months before she agreed to a first date. And everyone at the table was laughing. And my mother was covering her face with her hand the way she does when she is embarrassed and happy at the same time. I sat down and I laughed with them. The following morning, I was in our kitchen when my phone screen lit up with the camera notification. We had installed a smart doorbell and a side entrance camera when we moved in 2 years ago. Partly because our neighborhood had seen a string of package thefts. Partly because I have worked in property management long enough to understand that documentation is not paranoia. It is simply good practice. My sister-in-law was standing at the side door of our garage. She had a key. She had been given a key 18 months ago, when she was storing some furniture during a move, and needed access. I had forgotten about it, which was my oversight, and one I corrected immediately the moment I saw the camera feed. Because we have an electronic deadbolt on the main entrance, and I changed the code from my phone in about 30 seconds. What I could not change immediately was the garage door, which has a physical key lock. I watched her try it. The key turned. The door opened. She went inside. Our garage is not connected to the house. It holds our car, some seasonal equipment, and a storage shelf with tools and boxes. There is nothing of particular value in there. There is also nothing of hers, because she collected her furniture 14 months ago. I called my husband into the kitchen and showed him the feed. I watched him watch it. I watched his face go through something complicated. The particular expression of someone who loves a person and has been telling himself a gentler version of who they are for a very long time. "What is she looking for?" he said quietly. "I don't know," I said. "But she's in our garage without permission, with a key she was supposed to return." He called her. She didn't pick up. He texted her. Nothing for 11 minutes. And then I just needed to get something I left there. "It's fine." He looked at the camera feed. Then at me. Then back at the feed. There is a moment in every long relationship where one person finally sees something they have been carefully not seeing. And it is never comfortable. And it never looks the way you expect. My husband is a good man. He sat at the kitchen table for a while without saying anything. And then he said, "I need to call my parents." What followed over the next 2 weeks was the kind of reckoning that happens when a pattern finally becomes impossible to explain away. My husband sat down with his parents and laid out, calmly and without drama, every amount that had been borrowed and not returned, every event that had been disrupted, every time my name had been attached to a bill I did not agree to. He had always known the amounts. He had simply never said them all out loud in sequence before, said in sequence. They told a different story than any individual incident had on its own. My mother-in-law cried. My father-in-law was very quiet for a long time. My sister-in-law's boyfriend ended things 2 weeks later. She told her friends it was mutual. He told a mutual acquaintance that he had been uncomfortable for months, and that the dinner had been the moment he understood something he should have understood sooner. My sister-in-law sent me a message in early March. It was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph said she was going through a difficult period. The second paragraph said she felt I had handled the anniversary dinner in a way that was unnecessarily humiliating. The third paragraph said that at the end of the day, we are family. And family should support each other. I read it twice. My pulse did not change. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and went to finish making dinner. And that evening, my husband and I sat at our table and ate together and talked about the weekend. And the conversation was easy in a way that it had not always been easy. Because there was nothing sitting underneath it anymore. My parents called me the following Sunday to thank me again for the anniversary dinner. My mother said it was the nicest evening she had had in years. My father said the slideshow made him cry. Which he said with the particular gruffness of a man who considers crying a private activity. And I knew from the way he said it, that he meant it as the highest compliment he knew how to give. I had saved the money for that dinner over 6 months. Setting aside a fixed amount, every pay period. Which is how I approach most things I care about. It was worth every dollar. Now I want to talk to you for a minute about what actually happened that night. Because I think it is easy to watch a story like this, and focus on the part where the credit cards declined, or the part where someone got caught on a security camera, and miss the part that actually matters. My sister-in-law did not crash that dinner because she is a monster. She crashed it because she had spent years learning that the cost of doing exactly what she wanted was almost always absorbed by someone else. Not because the people around her were stupid, but because they were kind. And she had learned to use kindness the way a landlord uses a lease. As a mechanism for extracting value from someone who wants to believe in the relationship. Behavioral researchers call this an exploitation loop. It is not dramatic or unusual. It happens in families, in workplaces, in friendships. And it almost always follows the same pattern. The person doing the exploiting is not consistently terrible. Because consistently terrible people get cut off quickly. They are intermittently wonderful. They remember your birthday sometimes. They show up for you occasionally. They make you feel, in the good moments, like the relationship has real value. And then they draw on that account. Slowly and incrementally. Until the balance is gone, and you have been standing at a zero for longer than you realized. The way to interrupt that loop is not to yell. Not to write a long email. Not to threaten consequences you will not follow through on. The way to interrupt it is to do exactly what I did with Priya at the front of the restaurant. Draw a hard logistical line before the situation unfolds. Not after. When you control the structure, you control the outcome. My sister-in-law could not charge anything to my account, because I had already made it structurally impossible. She could not talk her way out of the bill, because the bill was already in her name. She could not perform her way through it, because the cards told a story that performance cannot override. That is what I call the paper trail principle. Stop relying on conversations, which can be misremembered and reframed, and start creating documented, structural realities. A separate check. A changed lock code. A camera with a timestamp. Not because you are planning a war, but because documentation is simply what respect for yourself looks like in practice. The second thing I want you to understand is about the moment at the coat check with my mother-in-law. That moment is the hinge of this entire story. Not the declined cards. Not the garage camera. Not any of the dramatic parts. The moment when someone who loves you asks you to swallow something painful to protect someone else's comfort. And you have to decide whether love means compliance. I understand why she asked. She was not trying to hurt me. She was trying to protect her daughter from consequences. Which is what she had always done. And she had simply never stopped to consider what absorbing those consequences was costing the people around her. When I told her that I was not willing to fund an uninvited table, I was not punishing her. I was refusing to participate in a system that had been quietly bankrupting my peace for years. You are allowed to do that. You are allowed to say, clearly and without apology, that there is a limit to what you will absorb in the name of keeping things comfortable for everyone else. That limit is not selfishness. It is the basic accounting of a life that works. And the third thing, the one I want to leave you with, is about the $3. $500 I did not spend. I did not save that money for anything dramatic. It went into our emergency fund, which is sitting in a high-interest savings account at our credit union, and which means that the next time something actually goes wrong, and something will always eventually go wrong, we will have options. My parents' anniversary dinner cost what it cost, and it was worth it. The uninvited table cost 6 people, exactly what they ordered. Which is also correct. I am not telling you this story to celebrate the part where someone's credit card declined in front of her friends. That was not a victory. That was a consequence. And consequences are not victories. They are just what happens when a structure is finally allowed to function the way it was always supposed to. The real story is my father crying at a slideshow. The real story is my husband sitting at the kitchen table and choosing honesty over comfort. The real story is the Sunday phone call and the way my mother sounded when she said it was the nicest evening she had had in years. Protect what matters. Draw the line before you need to. And when someone tells you that tolerating their behavior is the price of belonging to a family, remember that belonging is not a price. It is not something you earn by making yourself smaller. A family that requires your silence to function is not offering you belonging. It is offering you a role. And you are always free to stop playing it. Have you ever been in a room where someone was spending money they didn't have on a tab they expected you to cover? Have you ever been the person who had to choose between absorbing the cost and finally letting the consequence land? Tell me in the comments. Because if you have been there, you already know how long that hallway feels. And you deserve to know that the door at the end of it actually opens. If this story gave you something today, hit subscribe. I'm here every week. And my tab is permanently closed.